Good evening, friends, and welcome. So glad you could join us for Bedtime Biographies, where together we unwind and drift away to the stories of remarkable lives, some noble, some tragic, all unforgettable. Tonight, we journey to a nation divided, a young America torn apart by war, slavery, and the weight of its own ideals. The year is 1861. The air hums with tension. The streets buzz with debate. And at the center of it all stands a man whose name would become synonymous with courage, wisdom, and sacrifice: Abraham Lincoln. Before we begin, a quick thought. If these quiet reflections on history's giants help you unwind, please consider liking this video and subscribing. It helps others discover these stories too. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Which leader would you like us to explore next? Let us know in the comments below. To speak Lincoln's name is to summon images of a towering figure, his face etched with the sorrow of war, his words ringing with moral clarity. But beneath the legend was a man of humble beginnings, a log cabin, a borrowed book, a mind sharpened by struggle. His story is one of relentless perseverance, of a self-taught lawyer who rose to steer a fractured nation toward its better angels. History remembers his triumphs: the Emancipation Proclamation, the Gettysburg Address, the preservation of the Union. But tonight, we're not just here for the speeches or the victories. We're here to meet the man, the father who grieved lost sons, the leader who doubted yet endured, the weary soul who carried a country's hopes on his shoulders. And now, as the evening settles in, let's trace the life of a man who believed a house divided could not stand, yet dared to rebuild it. This is the Bedtime Biography of Abraham Lincoln. Chapter 1: A Humble Kentucky Dawn. Our story unfolds in the Kentucky backcountry during the early, rather brisk months of 1809. Abraham Lincoln made his debut on February 12th. His first earthly home was a simple log cabin, nestled on a piece of land known as Sinking Spring Farm. You might picture this region as the American frontier in its raw youth, a sprawling canvas of ancient forests where settlers, with considerable effort, were etching out their lives. For these pioneers, existence was often a straightforward dialogue with necessity, a blend of stark challenges and an unshowy, quiet resolve. The nation itself, remember, was still young then, barely a few decades into its grand experiment. That cabin, young Abraham's first shelter, was a practical response to the demands of the era. Imagine a single room, built from sturdy, rough-hewn logs gathered from the nearby woods. The floor beneath their feet was lightly packed earth, a direct connection to the land itself. A stone fireplace would have been the cabin's warm heart, essential for both cooking the daily meals and chasing off the persistent chill. Light, a precious commodity, would have found its way in through a small window, perhaps covered with oiled paper rather than glass, offering a somewhat hazy view of the world outside. It was, in essence, a dwelling built for endurance, not for elegant display. Thomas Lincoln, Abraham's father, was a man well acquainted with physical labor and the unyielding nature of the frontier. A farmer by trade, he also turned his hand to carpentry when opportunities arose, endeavoring to provide for his family. As was common for many settlers pushing westward, Thomas relocated his family a few times during Abraham's earliest years. His quest was often for more fertile land or perhaps a more secure legal hold on his property, a familiar narrative of hope and restless movement. Thomas knew the unglamorous, steady effort required to persuade the earth to yield a living. Nancy Hanks Lincoln, Abraham's mother, comes to us through historical accounts as a woman of gentle character and a quiet, thoughtful intelligence. Though her life was undoubtedly shaped by the era's hardships, descriptions hint at a reflective soul. It's widely believed Nancy possessed the valuable skill of literacy, a true distinction when formal education was a rarity. One can imagine her sharing stories or the rhythms of language with young Abraham, perhaps planting early seeds of his lifelong love for words. Though her time with him was brief, her gentle influence is often noted as a key element in his formative years. For the infant Abraham, life within that Kentucky cabin was an elemental experience, stripped to its core. You won't find tales of elaborate nurseries or an abundance of toys. His earliest world was woven from the fundamental sensations, the comforting warmth radiating from the hearth, the pervasive scent of wood smoke clinging to the air, and the feel of simple, homespun cloth. The daily soundtrack would have been the soft murmur of his parents' voices, mingling with the diverse, often untamed, sounds of the wilderness that began just beyond their cabin door. These were his first, unfiltered lessons in what it meant to be. The immense wilderness that enveloped their small homestead was a powerful, if silent, instructor. Towering forests loomed nearby. Clear streams meandered through the landscape, and the presence of wildlife was an accepted part of daily existence. Growing up amidst such untamed nature would naturally hone a child's senses and their capacity for observation. The distinct procession of the seasons brought its own clear teachings. The subtle tracks of animals, the practical uses of various plants, the telltale signs of an approaching storm. This was knowledge absorbed directly from the world itself, fostering a deep, practical wisdom. In the year 1809, the United States was still very much in the process of forging its national identity. For those inhabitants on its western fringes, like the Lincolns in Kentucky, the grand pronouncements and political machinations of the federal government in distant Washington could seem worlds away. Frontier communities were often characterized by their small size and a necessary self-reliance. Yet this also fostered a strong sense of interdependence. Neighbors relied on one another for mutual assistance with major undertakings, knowing that collective effort was often crucial for survival and modest advancement. News from the broader nation traveled at a ponderous pace, so the immediate concerns of local life usually held sway. This, then, was the environment that cradled Abraham Lincoln's first years. It was undoubtedly a life of considerable material simplicity, defined by the relentless demands and unvarnished realities of a frontier existence. However, it is often in such challenging circumstances that certain strengths of character are deeply forged. Resilience in the face of adversity, a practical ingenuity born of necessity, and a profound understanding of the everyday struggles of ordinary folk These were the quiet lessons of his Kentucky upbringing. The uncomplaining fortitude of people building lives against a backdrop of hardship was a powerful example. These formative experiences would remain with him, profoundly shaping his worldview and his enduring empathy for the common person. Chapter 2: Indiana Trials and a Mother Lost. The Lincoln family's time in Kentucky eventually drew to a close. Around 1816, when young Abraham was just 7 years old, Thomas Lincoln decided to move his family